Greetings, this is Dr. Della Welch, and our lecture today is about Thomas Hobbes, who had one view of the nature of man, and John Locke, who had a very different view of the nature of man. Thomas Hobbes lived a long time. He died at age 91. But what is very unique about him is he was the first to come up with the idea of a social contract. Now, sometime years ago, man lived as a caveman, but eventually he wanted to have a government. This is kind of the origin of government. And man was willing to give up some of their freedoms and some of their resources in exchange for the protection, safety, and security of the government. Some of my students say, "Teacher, I really don't understand the social contract." Well, I clarify and say it's somewhat of an invisible contract, that somewhere along the line, people decided that they needed a government, and this was the origin of the government. Now, the nature of man is critical to that social contract, because Thomas Hobbes, his view was that people were short with others, not short physically, but short as to how they would deal with others, and they were poor, nasty, and solitary, and were very brutish. So man was basically very, very evil, like an animal. So he said the only way to govern a man of this particular bad nature and evil nature was to have a monarchy. He said only a monarchy will do. And one thing about Hobbes, he saw the state of nature as a state of war, all against all. And he says even though it's a bad monarchy, that's the way to go. However, we look at John Locke, and he had an entirely different view. He said the nature of man is good and cooperative. He rejected the theories of Hobbes. You remember Hobbes wrote the Leviathan, in which he said that only like a sea monster, such as in Job 41, could govern man. And he said that all people had to take note of the sea monster, and that was the proper king or ruler, and everyone had to do whatever he said. The Leviathan is like a king that represents the people. People need to be united as one. People give consent to a king, and that people act according to this base evil instinct. And only a king can control this selfish man. And I checked the verse in the Bible, and it does speak of the Leviathan. But John Locke said, no, man is basically good and cooperative, and the democracy is the best form of government. And the democracy would have the checks and balances like we have in America today. In fact, John Locke was, I think, spiritually present, although not physically present, when the Founding Fathers got together our constitutional document, because his thoughts were very influential to the Founding Fathers. He said if the democracy didn't work, the people could revolt. And he said that that should be our goal, and he rejected the monarchy. So you can look at our world today, Can you think of places where there are oppressive governments? I think of North Korea and Cuba, where there's much control. I heard of one country that gives an exam once a year, and that determines what people will do and be. If you score in the top 3%, you can be a lawyer or a doctor. And if you score in the bottom 3%, you may be a motel maid.